Here's what you can do with Claude Code that you can't do with anything else. You can git clone a 1,000,000 line mono repo that you've never seen before, never touched before. Maybe it's an open source project you've been interested. You can start to understand it almost instantly with Claude Code. You can understand its structure. You can understand where the features are set. You can understand how the code base is organized. You can understand the configs and all the tooling that the developers use to build the program. You can run tests, you can break tests, you can modify tests, you can implement a feature and test it. You can open a pull request. All of this just using the terminal, right? The IDE terminal or the terminal on your computer that you use. Maybe you use iTem, whatever it is, you can run it in there. Claude Code is an extraordinarily powerful tool. No more, going to a chat window and asking questions and copy pasting snippets back and forth, and no more fighting about context windows, no more bouncing between different tools and switching tabs and context switching, none of that. Claude Code works with your file system, and it has access to the same bash tools that advanced developers would use back in the day when they were writing a lot of bash scripts, right? It's very powerful stuff just with these two things: access to your file system and the ability to run bash commands, okay? And with your prompt and the fact that it's the model, the Anthropic Claude model is so powerful and really good at code, just having access to your code base and bash commands, it's able to do pretty much anything a software engineer can do, okay? But where you come in is, as the engineer, it's your responsibility to tell it what needs to be done. It's still your responsibility to know what to do, to have a basic hypothesis on the best way to do it. Most importantly, all the things that should not be done, all the gotchas, all the edge cases that need to be thought about, what kind of tests you want. In fact, coding with Claude Code has made it so much easier for me to use test-driven development, TDD, because it is incredibly good at spinning up those tests. It saves me thousands of keystrokes and hours of work because it'll do all that for me. I just got to review it, understand what's in there, stress test the tests a bit, and then I can start to implement the code again with Claude Code. Okay, it is phenomenal at understanding your code base, understanding patterns, and doing all that. Now, the purpose of this video and several videos is to make you a Claude Code power user. Okay, this introductory video today's video is only going to be an introduction and an overview to help you get some basic concepts down. And then after that, we'll go deeper into specific features and functionality of Claude Code. Because everything in the AI space is moving so fast, I don't want this video to be outdated and useless in 3 months, right? So I'm going to try and veer more towards mental models and conceptual explanations so that you as a developer have really strong foundational understanding of how this stuff works. Then you can reason about it from first principle. Then you can self-serve and self-actualize through the code, and you can get yourself unblocked anytime you need without having to spend a lot of time understanding this stuff. So these videos are going to be foundational baseline work for you, and I will try and make it age better by not having too much code in there that's going to get outdated, and instead just really focusing on you understanding key concepts. With that said, let's get stuck into this. Now, because I've broken my hand, I can't promise that the videos will come fast and thick, but I will try and make them as often as I can. I'm going to try for one a week on the weekends so that you guys can keep learning with me. What a lot of people can be quite confused with when it comes to Anthropic's Claude products is that there are several Claude products. It can be a little bit confusing to know which one's what because they're all called Claude in some form or the other. And Claude is named after Claude Shannon, right? The mathematician who really first expressed languages in the form of statistical models. And so it's named after him as an homage to him. Now, you may get initially a little bit confused about all these Claude products, so let's try and break them down for you. So broadly, you'll see that there are 4 types of Claude products that you'll end up seeing, right? The first one is Claude.ai. Think about this for those of you who are ChatGPT users. This is like the Claude equivalent of ChatGPT, okay? It is the chat UI interface in a web browser. You get it at Claude.ai, and it does all the stuff about thinking and learning and writing. And it's very good for ideating and having a discussion and doing some research. One-off discrete tasks like that is very good. Of course, it can hold memory for quite a while too if you need, but it's basically your classic chat UI interface. Then there's Claude Desktop, which is the native desktop app available for Mac and Windows, and you download it from claude.com. You don't need the browser for that, but you do need an internet connection, but it's a native application. And again, it's largely a chat interface. But I will say Claude Desktop does come with other functionality. I've written some MCP servers. I've connected that to my Claude Desktop. You can connect it to your Gmail and your calendar and track your calendar and meetings that way and get it to review emails and synopsize and summarize emails for you. It can do all of that stuff. It gets access to your clipboard and a few other tools. It's a little bit more powerful than just the web chat UI, and that's the Claude Desktop one. And obviously there are subscriptions for these. I have one, so I don't know what the status is now on that, but I'm pretty sure for the web chat one, Claude.ai, I'm pretty sure for that one there is a free tier, right? As long as you've logged in and created the account. Okay, so that's the first two, Claude AI, and then there's Claude Desktop. Now, let me skip over the one on the screen, Claude Code, because that's really what the series is about. Claude API is the third one I'll talk about. That's really, for the programmers among you, you'll understand what this means. It's basically API access to the Claude model, right, via REST APIs, so programmatic access. And you have console.anthropic.com. Again, OpenAI offers this. All of them offer something like this. You have prompt testing tools where you can run different prompts and see which ones get you the most reliable results. Toggle on and off various configuration options that you want. And this is the kind of tool that you'd use along with console and direct programmatic access via client libraries and SDKs. This is how you would extend your existing application and give it access to an AI, right? So if you have an app and you want to build on top of an LLM or give it LLM AI functionalities, you would use the API in your app to get access to Claude. And that's really what a lot of modern day LLM engineering is, and AI engineering is an engineer who integrates with AI LLMs using something like the Claude Anthropic API, right? I think they've recently renamed it to the Claude Developer Platform, which is really the API access. Obviously, it includes a bunch of the other products as well, like Code, but just think of CDP as the API for now. That's probably the simplest way. And lastly, but definitely not least, what I'm going to feature in this series is Claude Code. Big fan of Claude Code. Now, as you know, I'm ex-Google, so I've tried a lot of the other products. I've had pretty good success with Gemini, pretty good success with OpenAI, but to be honest, Claude Code got there first, in my opinion, in my experience anyway, and continues to be the one that I go to when I have time-sensitive and really important tasks that require high agentic capability that I want to get done fast when I really need the velocity. I've just found Claude Code to be by far and away the best, right? So, and just to be clear, no one's paying me to say that. It's just my honest view. Okay, so Claude Code is the agentic tool that's run out of your terminal. It is literally run out of your iTerm or whatever your terminal is. So if I were in my terminal, assuming you've already installed it, then you can just do something like Claude, right? And it'll start it up. And it'll say, do you want access to something locally? Do you want it to, yes, and that's fine by me. And then I'm going to say, hey, explain this code base to me, right? Now, I happen to know this is a personal project I've done some years ago when I was working at Google, but look at what it's going to do, right? And take a look at this. It's going to be thinking about a bunch of things. It's exploring the code base to understand this is pure agentic now. I'm not doing anything, right? And this is all the tasks it's going to start running, right? It's taking my basic instruction. By the way, I haven't touched this code in over 3 years now, so it's probably significantly out of date. But you will see that if I do Control O, you'll see that it's basically altered my prompt, right? I just said, hey, explain this code base to me in one paragraph. It basically expanded that into a series of tasks and steps. And then it said, okay, I'm going to look at this thing and the package.json, the main entry points, etc. And little sub-agents have been asked to give it a comprehensive understanding of these things. And it's reading my file path, as you can see here. It's searching for things. It's done a tree command. It's done a comprehensive code-based analysis, right? And what's happened is it's spun up a series of sub-agents, all which have access to my file system because read-only access. I've not asked it to change anything, so it can do this without needing my permission. And Claude is waiting for your input. Yeah, that's fine. That's great. So it's basically read the file system and it's done all of this stuff. It's done all of this analysis. Okay, and it tells you this is a web application, etc. This is the actual Claude response, by the way, right? So, sorry, this is all the thinking stuff. You can see, all the stuff with the little else symbol is just all the thinking it did, okay? It understood the core workflow. It got the database models. It got the architecture patterns in my project. It got the technical decisions, talks about Firebase, Express, Node Express in the back, EJS templates, all of that, right? And if I Control O again, it'll just give me the final response. So it hides all its reasoning away. And it's told me it's a full stack application, sends user a weekly email digest or links extracted from the incoming emails, built with React, TypeScript, blah, blah, blah. 100% true. 100% true. Okay, while cron schedule, fibers, function, set, personalized digest, while node mailer, all true. Like it's really understood the entire application. And if I just exit from this for a moment, if you see what's in the directory, you'll see there's a front end, there's a back end, there's readmes. There's a lot of material in here, and it's been able to do all of that just by searching through it. Now, this is just literally just one use case of Claude. This is what I call the onboarding use case, which, by the way, is actually exactly what they talk about on their website, right? If you go to claude.com/product/Claude Code and you scroll down, it'll pretty much tell you, hey, this is what you do. Onboarding is a great use case. Triaging issues is a fantastic use case. Refactoring code, also a really great use case, right? So it explains to you that this is the kind of stuff it's really excellent at. And it's totally true, guys. It is excellent. It is absolutely excellent at this, okay? Now, when we're talking about these different products, let's consider, well, what are the real world scenarios in which you'd use these? Okay, so Claude AI you'd use typically when you're doing a little bit of research or you're understanding some concepts, you want a study buddy, you want someone to guide you, a friendly professorial personality to guide you, you can do all that. I use the chat interface, or for me specifically Claude Desktop, I use that a lot when I just want to spitball ideas and I want to think through some things, or I want to do some research, I want to explain a concept to me, and I don't really want to write any code. It's very conversational, right? Now, if I want to write an article or an email, I'll also use Desktop or Claude, the Claude.ai website, which is the actual chat interface. I will use that sometimes if I need to, write an email, write a small blurb, summarize a large article, and so on and so forth. Parts of these videos were done with the help of the Claude Desktop app, because I would come up with the idea, I'd come up with the bullet points, I'd come up with all the learning outcomes, I'd come up with my goals, and I would say, this is what I'm trying to achieve, this is the structure I'm thinking of, what do you think, what would you improve, if this is the person that I expect would be interested in this kind of material, and this is where they're at in their learning journey, what would work for them, what would not work for them. And it was a really, really great buddy to discuss stuff like this. It was really like having an expert in the room that I could sit and have a conversation with and a discussion with. Okay, so that's the second use case. Now, if you want really fast file uploads, or you want to, now Claude, the model does have the ability to interpret images as well. So you can paste a screenshot, including of code, and say, hey, can you explain this to me? Which is great for those of you who are struggling with data structures and algorithms questions. Maybe you're on lead code and you're looking at an implementation in C++ or Java and you're not familiar. Maybe you're a TypeScript developer or Python developer. You can screenshot the code in that other language, C++ or whatever, upload it to the Claude Desktop app or the chat UI and say, can you convert this into JavaScript and explain to me every line? It's incredible. Like, you can learn data structures and algorithms. It's never easy to do it, but you can learn it so much easier than ever before just by using the image snapshotting tool. The other thing you'd want to use it for is, if let's say you're building a chatbot. Let's say you work at a bank or something and you want to have a chatbot that connects to somebody's accounts and gives them their account balance. Just something very simple like that, right? Now you want to do a chatbot, you're extending your application with Claude as a model underneath it for some chat-based retrieval. Okay, so now you'd use the programmatic API, the Claude Developer Platform, the Claude API, that's the REST API. That's what you'd use for that one. Now, let's say you're working on the application that is built using Claude, or maybe you want to use OpenAI or Gemini, whatever it is that you want to use as the LLM powering that chat functionality. But now you as a developer are building that chat functionality and you're writing some tests. You want to commit to Git. You want to, create an entire class that handles the chat. You want to create a whole new class or an object that handles storing data to the database, whatever it is. Now you can use Claude Code in the terminal to actually build that code out for you, to discuss with you what the spec should be, what the product requirements are, what the design thinking around the actual software would be. And then you can get Claude to actually write a lot of that code for you, and you just review it, review the PR or whatever. Or you're in the middle of coding and there's some weird bug and you just can't figure it out. It's like a pair program. You just give Claude access to that code base and say, hey, there's a bug here. This is the bug. This is the result. This is the stack trace. This is what I'm expecting. This is what I'm actually getting. This test is failing. Whatever information you have that you'd normally use as a developer to try and troubleshoot a bug, you'd give it to Claude, give it all that context, and set it loose in your code base, and it will 9 times out of 10, at least, if not more, fix it. Okay. Now, there are some differences that you must remember between all these products, right? Claude Chat is conversational. Claude Code is agentic. You saw just then when I did that little micro demo and I said, hey, explain what this code base is about. You saw it was calling a bunch of tools. It was recrafting the prompt, obviously, to give it to a sub-agent. The sub-agent would go off and do a bunch of things and read the files, pull back the files, summarize the files, send it back to the orchestrating agent. That would then update the next prompt and tick off a task in the task list. Like, it was very organized, right? Pretty much how we do it, right? We do a to-do list, and then we'd handle each item on the to-do list. And for each item on the to-do list, we'll go down a rabbit hole, do some research, do some digging around, do some testing, come back, it's done, tick, okay, next item. It's pretty much the same thing that is doing using agents and sub-agents. Yeah. Now, Anthropic, I will say, has a very specific definition of agents. I don't want to get too much into that, but let's just say that it's not probably accurate to refer to the chat apps as agents. They're just AI chat apps. Agents is more like what you saw when I was showing you Claude Code, where you give the AI LLM a series of tasks and it kind of autonomously does it, and there's no fixed path. Like, it was not clear what decisions it was going to take. I didn't tell it, do this next and then do this next and then do this next. I just said, hey, I want you to explain this code base to me. And that there was a considerable amount of autonomy that Claude had in deciding how to break that task down into its little pieces, what's called decomposition. It decomposes those tasks. It decides what tools it wants to use or what it needs to use. It gets the results of those tools, and those are called observations. And then it ingests those observations and then says, okay, based on this observation, this is what I need to do. And it'll often backtrack. It'll correct itself, especially when it's trying to debug things. It'll make mistakes, learn from those mistakes, remember those mistakes in its context or in its file system. It'll store them somewhere, and then it'll read them back when it's trying to assemble a solution. So that's much more agentic, because when you start it, you don't know how many times the agent is going to be called, and you don't know all the steps it's going to take, right? That's what true agentic workflows are. So that's what I mean when I say Claude Code is agentic, Claude Chat is conversational. It's a very important difference. Now, a lot of people seem to think it's mainly for coding workflows, and hey, it's kind of in the name, right? Claude Code, because it's basically giving Claude the model a kind of computer on its own, right? This is how Anthropic describes this as well, is what happens when you give Claude a computer. You give it access to your file system, and you give it access to some tools like Bash and grep and, less and things, or cat, and the ability to write files. And suddenly you've given it a computer. You've basically given it access to your computer, and it's able to do extraordinary things outside of coding, because ultimately anything you do on a computer can be done via the terminal. Even if you're not a coder, anytime you're clicking on a button or you're opening a window, these things can be done via the terminal as well, right? They're basically computer operations, and Claude with the computer can operate the computer. So Claude Code is not exclusive to coding related activities. It can be used for a number of other things. It's just that because it's in a terminal, non-coders are not likely to be using it, right? But Claude Code can handle a ton of things. And underneath the hood, Claude Code is basically, as I understand it, it's a Node application. I think it may even be a React.js application, if I'm not mistaken, with something called Ink, I think, which is a way to give a UI to your terminal. Anyway, so I think it's basically a JavaScript at the end of the application that then under the hood calls the Claude API. Remember the REST API we were talking about? That's still how the model is accessed. But the actual application running on your computer is basically a React/Node.js application that communicates back with the REST API, but it has access to your file system, and it has access to your computer, and therefore it can do things, send the results back to the AI. The AI will tell it what tool to call next. Now, that's more advanced tool calling kind of stuff. And for those of you who are down the AI rabbit hole, you'll know what tool calling is. We don't need to worry about that. We just need to know how Claude Code works and how to use it ourselves and how to get the most out of it. Okay. Now, like I said earlier, over the next few weeks, I'm going to try and teach you guys as much as I know about Claude Code in a way that makes you faster and better at what you do. It'll probably be skewed more to developers because I'm an engineer myself and I like teaching developers, and I'm not really getting the opportunity to do non-development experiments with this. So, probably most of my examples will be development focused, right? Now, I don't want you to think that these are tricks or hacks. None of this. These are actual patterns that the Anthropic team themselves apparently use daily based on my research on blogs and other things I've looked into and podcasts I've heard. And it's the same patterns, believe it or not, that the Anthropic engineers use to ship, as I understand it, I think more than 70% or 80% of Claude Code, the actual application is written by Claude Code. So Claude Code is writing itself. Now, when people hear that, they think, oh, you don't need an engineer. No, that's quite the opposite. Claude Code may be doing the effective typing, right? But the engineer is still saying, hey, this is what I want. No, I don't quite like that. No, this needs to change. So in some sense, it's almost moving closer to like a natural language style of programming, but you can't do that unless you really, really, really know how to program. And so you can give it very specific directions, very high quality prompts. None of this works without high quality prompts, and you can't give high quality prompts with the right level of detail and accuracy unless you are highly technical yourself, right? So the Anthropic engineering team can, within quotes, I hate this term, but they can vibe code it. They're not vibe coding, they're actually engineering, but they're doing it using more natural language techniques because they're able to actually evaluate and they know exactly what needs to be done, and they can get it to do things because they know those things are achievable already. Okay, let's talk about the origin story of Claude Code. Okay, it really, it went up to, I think, $500 million, $500 million of revenue in less than a year. And I think it's down a run rate to billions already. Okay. But let me tell you how recent this was. I'm recording this in November 2025. Okay. In September 2024, a guy called Boris Cherny joined the Anthropic, and he builds a prototype in his first week, really kind of a CLI tool for, I think it sounds like he was doing it for himself, for his own amusement, right? And at this point of time, this CLI tool can't really read files from the file system. It can't run bash commands, anything like that. But what it can do is control a music player using the Anthropic model API. Yeah. And the ability to write code kind of emerged unexpectedly when this tool that he wrote was given access to other tools like Bash. For those of you who don't know Bash, it's the low-level shell program really that connects directly with the operating system kernel to basically control the computer. And when he gave that level of access to the CLI tool, it suddenly allowed him to automate tasks, such as writing scripts, Apple scripts and stuff like that. Now, after that, Boris realized, I think from what I was able to piece together, he's like, hang on, if I give this thing access to tools, it's able to do amazing things and write scripts. Now, what happens if I give it access to file systems, right? So, your basic folders and files in your computer. And he realized that, Bash plus file system, and you pipe the results back, right? Piping is a Unix principle in programming where the results are sort of streamed into something. So you do file system work, you do Bash work, and the results of that get piped back into the Claude API, and the Claude model is able to then process it and send you back more instructions. That becomes a feedback loop that changes everything. And that's kind of the original agentic feedback loop, right? Now, this is, like I said, in September 2024. By November 2024, all the other ants, I think that's what the people at Anthropic call themselves, ants, people who work at Anthropic, all the other ants were using Claude via the CLI while working on their code. So, just a few months, it got incredibly good uptake internally, right? And I think on day one, if I'm not mistaken, from my research, 20% of the engineering team at Claude was actually using the original CLI tool. By day 5, it is 50%. So in a week, really, half the engineering function was using Claude Code in its early version. They didn't call it that then, I don't think. By day 10, they were actually seriously wondering if they should even release this thing publicly because it was so good that it was an unfair competitive advantage internally. And again, this I've got using Claude to research, but also from some podcasts. So I don't know this directly. I've never spoken to Boris directly. Would love to speak to him. If any of you know him and think he'd be open to being on my podcast, please let me know. It would be great to find out. Because a lot of people think that these kind of amazing products are just built with some sort of vision. Everything I'm reading and hearing about Claude Code, it sounded like just what all of us could do and would do is we come up with an idea. Hey, I want to fix this myself. I'm going to experiment with it. And suddenly, right idea, right term, well executed. And suddenly it explodes into this thing only because we never realized how powerful it actually could be when we did it, right? So it's an inspirational story for all of us to continue to hack and try things out because you never know which one could be genuinely world-changing. Anyway, these guys at Anthropic, it sounds like we're not sure, hey, should we release this publicly? It could give other people the same advantage we have, and right now it's an unfair advantage in our favor, so should we lose that unfair advantage? Anyway, they decided to release it, which is very much, I think, in keeping with Anthropic's ethos. And then in May 2025, which is 6 months later, it is generally available to the world as a software tool, which is very recent. That's 6 months ago from the recording of this episode. And then October 2025, by that, between May and October, there was 10x the user growth, right? And now it's a $500 million plus annualized revenue product that's just growing faster and faster. And more importantly, it's being adopted a lot by the enterprise and business segment as well, which is really, really telling you something, Now, more than 80% of Anthropic's engineers who write code use Claude Code daily, right? And data scientists use it to figure out, to run their scripts better or to do their data science work or analytics work or exploratory data analysis more. Entire teams now do, what's known as multi-agents. They literally have multiple Claude Code sessions in what's known as Git work trees, and they're all working in parallel, tackling different problems and different, angles and requirements. And then the engineers just bringing and stitching it all back together again with the help of Claude Code. But it's almost like people go from having 2 arms to 6 arms. Like, what would you do? More things you can juggle. It's kind of like that, right? It's basically made technical folks get really fast, very productive. And if I understand correctly, I think on the Pragmatic Engineer, Gergely's blog, I think he mentions after having interviewed them that I think he said the average Anthropic engineer is shipping to production 3 to 5 times per day per engineer, which is blisteringly fast. Also explains why they're able to move so fast in the space and get so many releases. If you follow their blog, I think it's every 2 weeks they've got a new release of some new feature coming out. It's just incredibly fast in production, right? Now, that growth was pretty much zero marketing as far as I could tell. It was just developers telling other developers, hey, Claude works and does the same things I do using the same tools that I do, just that much faster. And I can get so much more done with Claude. And I think that's an incredibly powerful, dynamic way to get more adoption. Okay, now let's talk about this concept of giving Claude a computer, what that actually means, because that's kind of the heart of what Claude Code actually does, right? So in 2025, Anthropic decided to give Claude language model a computer. This is not really a metaphor, though, kind of is, but it's actually what Claude Code does. Like I said earlier, you're giving it access to the computer almost on a bare metal level. You're effectively putting the model, you're kind of bolting it on to your computer, almost at the hardware level, right? What that means is that the Claude Code application is able to give to Claude the language model insight into your file system, the results of bash tools that it's called, operations that it's conducted, also give it a list of tools that it can run. For example, if you have Git tools or NPM or linters or whatever it is, your tests, you can do a number of things using just simple bash commands, and you pipe the results back into the Claude language model. And then the language model can then say, hey, I know you have access to these tools. I just saw that you sent me this stuff. It sounds like we next need to run this tool to figure this step out, which is, I think, the next way of the reasoning. And then back and forth it goes. It tells Claude Code what tools to run. Claude Code runs those tools because it has access to the tools and your file systems, and then it sends the results back to the AI, and the AI says, okay, now that I've got all this additional information, the right next step is this, and then back again, and then back and forth it goes, right? Now, that's a lot of decision making that the model has to make based entirely on what it's learning from Claude Code that's sending it information, right? So this is not just faster code generation. this is a different paradigm to working altogether, right? Here's how I think of the shift, right? You're not just running some sort of Q&A session with the chatbot and then pasting stuff into your IDE. Instead, what you're doing is you're pair programming with an AI, right? You use Claude Code as a senior engineer in your team that you're budding up with. And even more, it becomes like your personal agent that you can delegate work to. You can just say, hey, this is what I need done. This is how I would normally do it. These are the specs. These are the tests I want written. Start here, do this, do that, and then check in with me on any major decisions. But otherwise, this is the outcome I want. These are the kind of tests I want. This is how I want it to look. This is how I want it to behave. Go do it. Let me know when it's done. Just send me a Slack message. I mean, it's incredible. It's literally, delegating to an AI, right? And your job then as an engineer is definitely to continue to know how to do all these things. Now, speaking for myself, I will never be as fast as an AI when it comes to this. It takes me time to read docs. I get stuck often. I am not as fast as understanding docs and commands as an AI is. I do love learning this stuff. And so my job as an engineer these days, as far as I can see, is to think about what needs to be done, do some research about is this actually the right approach. And sometimes that research will be done using Claude, the desktop app, right? And then once I have a plan, I will get that plan to Claude Code and say, okay, now we're going to break this down into these steps. Let's make a smaller plan, break this bigger plan down into steps. What do you think we should do? Debate with it. And then I will say, okay, now go away and do this. And these are these aspects I want you to do, right? And Claude Code, we'll cover this in subsequent videos, has a lot of built-in tools where you can manage context and you can manage memory and you can spin up sub-agents. You can reuse and repackage your own regular prompts into skills or plugins or whatever different format that you want to have them take. And it just basically, it kind of packages your workflow into little pieces or big pieces, and you can reuse or do for the first time, and it's incredibly powerful, okay? Let's talk about how this actually changes the way teams actually ship real things, right? I've been able to verify this as well from other companies as well, where I know people are using this. So, StubHub, for example, there's faster execution speed for delivering features and fixes, which I can totally imagine. I think Figma also uses it to convert designs into code. Inside Anthropic, we've talked about it. In fact, if you look at this blog here, sorry, I'm very slow at typing because I've broken my broken my fingers. Anthropic. That's an older one. So this is what we talk about, how Claude Code is built. This is the one you want to look at, right? So very, very much a phenomenal read. I strongly recommend you read this one. And it talks about the beginning story and everything. So, lots of teams are using Claude Code, not just inside Anthropic, but externally as well, right? And increasingly, as I understand it and I'm observing it, Claude Code is kind of becoming the first stop for many engineering tasks. It's where you start thinking about things and it's where you sort of evaluate things as well. Design teams are using it. Data science teams are using it. Scientific research, biomedical teams are using it. Non-engineers are using it a lot. Like one of my friends runs his own consulting business to do with government branding and stuff like that. And he uses Claude, the desktop app, every single day. He absolutely loves it. Pretty much every creator on YouTube that I know uses it extensively for copywriting, for podcast planning, all of that kind of stuff. And now that it has all sorts of agentic tools in it, you can automate a bunch of your normal workflows, coming up with thumbnails, summarizing podcasts, coming up with 2 to 3 emails based on a podcast. Like incredible sort of workflows are being created. And developers do report. And I can tell you this is not just anecdotal from my experience. You can turn hours-long bits of workflow and tasks into a single command and just wait for it to complete. It's literally having a robot, an agent servant, if you like, to help you and help you get things done, provided you know what needs to be done. And it's so good at analyzing large code bases. It can make incredibly powerful autonomous edits and undo those edits, learn from its mistakes, undo those mistakes, and so on. And now, there's something new called the sandbox runtime that Anthropic has released on an experimental basis. I'm going to dig into that a bit more, but that will give you a contained sandbox environment, quite similar with what they do right now in Claude Code and in Claude Code for the web, which is something we'll talk about later. But these are sandbox environments that help you run Claude Code in an even more safe, contained environment that you otherwise would have, which means the downside is quite low if you know what you're doing, and the upside is tremendous time saving and speed and velocity. You can also, I'm trying this out myself, is agentic research, code research, where I'll give Claude Code a bunch of instructions, give it access to my GitHub repo, and it'll have a new branch created with the code ready, and then it just opens a PR, and I review that PR later on when I'm ready, and see if it's good enough to improve or to bring into the main code base, or otherwise I'll just tell Claude Code this is what I need to fix. It's literally like having your own personal team of coders that you can work with, and it's a massive reduction in coding time and research time. So I, for example, can't remember the last time I actually go and Google something now, if I'm not sure about something in a code base or I'm not sure how to write. Sometimes I'll switch between languages. I'm much more of a TypeScript developer. Sometimes I'll write in Python or Golang. If I haven't touched it for a few months, I'll be like, hang on, how do I do this? And I'll just do it in Claude Code now to say, hey, this is what I want to do in this language. Just refresh me again. What does this mean? How does this work? And so on. Incredibly powerful research tool as well. So a couple of things for you guys to remember. Like I said, Claude Code is CLI native. There is a VS Code extension or cursor extension. You can use it that way. I prefer to use it in the terminal. I just find it incredibly powerful this way. You'll see this is kind of what it looks like. And I just, find, and you can sort of type all the commands. If you type slash, you get all the slash commands here. We'll talk about all this stuff later on, we'll talk about most of these things later on. I'll at least tell you what slash commands are, what skills are, what hooks are, what plugins are, and so on and so forth. Now, on the 20th of October, 2025, Anthropic announced Claude Code on the web. And I tried it 2 days ago after I read this blog by Simon Willison. So let me show my screen here. There you go. This is the blog. He talks about, code research projects using async coding agents, right? And so how Claude Code works on the web is you can run your coding tasks in parallel. Now, I strongly recommend you go to this website here, just Google Claude Code on the web, the blog, and you'll see that there's a great video here. It's very, very good. Gives you an illustrative use of how you can use Claude Code. Now, I've used this as well. In fact, mine was here where, I wanted to create just a debate platform using Fast API. I was trying to teach myself a bit more about Python, Fast API, and Gradio UI. And so, I'd given it a detailed prompt. And as always, I'd asked it, any questions before you start. It asked me a bunch of questions. I told it what it did. And during this time, while it was off going away and doing this, and it had connected, to the right repo, I connected to the relevant repo on my GitHub. I went and had breakfast with a friend, came back, and by the time, the PR was done. In fact, it's pretty cool because it'll tell you, you can view the PR. Now, I'm not signed in on this browser to my GitHub account, but it's created all the code in a new application. And I'll be honest, I haven't actually had a chance to review it yet. This is just a couple of days ago. It's a very powerful use case, and it even gives you a way. If this is Claude Code on the web, it's at Claude Code. It's at claude.ai/code, and it'll give you a command. You copy this, you paste it into your terminal, and as long as you're in the correct directory for this repo, for your GitHub repo, as long as you're in that directory, it'll open up Claude Code in your terminal and just continue as though nothing had happened. So super powerful tool. Again, recommend reading Simon Wilson's blog on agentic code research projects. Really powerful way to do it, and I enjoyed that experience very much. So I'm hoping that the code will be as good as it always is. It should be, because it's the same model, just done remotely in a sandbox environment in the cloud, and then made available to me locally in Claude Code. So generally, this is a very powerful mental frame that needs to change for us developers, especially those of us who are accustomed to using ChatGPT and other chat UI based in AI experiences. We need to move away from the Q&A model or the approach, right? AI is more than just a Q&A chatbot. We should be using it as a way that's more agentic. Now, Cursor, Windsurf, VS Code, they all support this agentic workflow. So does ChatGPT, or rather OpenAI. So does Gemini. They all have their own variant of this. So I encourage you to try it out in your own. Check out which one's right for you. Experiment with prompts and try and give them the same sort of prompts so that you're able to benchmark correctly. But on the whole, I personally found Claude Code to be the most reliable in my experience, and it's the one that's my go-to for very time-sensitive and important tasks, right? And I definitely prefer to use it in the terminal rather than through the IDE extension window or chat window or anything like that, right? So all this to say, invert your mental model on how to code from, I want to ask the agent questions and do that back and forth Q&A, to how do I get it to execute work as my agent, as my delegate, provided I really know what needs to be done. Now, in terms of how to install it, of course, you can use the VS Code extension or the Cursor extension. Like I said, I prefer to use it in the terminal. If you actually do end up going to the website, you can see that there's a curl command you can use. There's also an npm package. You can just do an npm install -g for the global install, and off you go, right? So there are a number of ways you can install it. I continue to use it as much as I can in the actual terminal. And if you want Claude Code on the web, you'll need claude.ai. The chat interface is where you'll need to go and then open a session there. But again, I think these are all paid things, so I would recommend you check that first. And if you're getting a subscription, get a monthly subscription for 1 or 2 months and check it out. The whole setup takes 2 minutes if you're reasonably familiar with the command line and npm install or curl and so on and so forth. And then after that, getting to know how to use Claude, well, that's the whole point of this video series. And for that, you can stay tuned for other videos that I'll have. I will be doing more videos, and hopefully they'll come in the coming weeks, depending on how this hand is doing. Let me quickly show you what sort of topics we'll be covering. We'll be talking about the importance of context engineering, which is much more than prompt engineering, much more than RAG and all that. The basic commands that you've got, file and context management, the tools and permissions, and how you work with the permission system in Claude Code. Code, using planning and thinking modes, how to get the most out of your Claude Code sessions, how to make custom slash commands and plugins, MCP servers. We won't go deep into MCP. I've written a few of them now. We won't go deep into the model context protocol, but we will talk about how you can connect Claude Code to existing MCP servers, which gives it a whole new suite of functionality depending on what you do. Then sub agents. Now Claude Code, as you saw previously at the start of the video when I showed you how I use Claude Code to explain a code base, it does seem to spin up its own sub agents. It obviously decides when it needs to do so, but you can actually give it sub agents specifically that it needs to spin up. You can also integrate it with your AI, with your CI/CD workflows in GitHub, which is a very powerful way to get code reviews done and other checks done, in your CI/CD pipeline. We've already talked about Claude Code on the web, and I probably will do a slightly longer session on that. Not a lot longer, but just give you an illustrative example because things keep changing quite fast in this space. I'm a little hesitant about making stuff that'll get dated in 3 months. And then finally, I'll talk a few learnings of mine about what happens when you try to adopt this as a team or in a group or a collaborative open source project versus doing it on your own and so on. So we've got quite a bit to cover in the coming weeks, and I hope to be able to do this at least once a week. Until next time, I'll see you then. Before I forget, please do like and subscribe. Please add some comments. Tell somebody else about it because, I'm doing this out of interest in the subject and also to help you guys, especially all of those of you who are trying to learn to code and pivot your careers into AI engineering and so on and so forth. So please do like and subscribe. It will help me greatly. It'll keep me very motivated and juiced to keep sending you content that you can actually use day to day. All right, take care. Cheers.